Good morning, everyone. We're going to get underway. Please come on through and take a seat. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Lived Experience of Suicide Summit. Thank you all for being here, and what a thrill it is to see so many people with lived experience of suicide here in the one room. I think this is actually the largest gathering of people with lived experience of suicide that's ever taken place in Australia. So yes, round of applause. So for those friends I haven't met yet, my name's Stephen Scott. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the General Manager of Strategy and Policy at Roses in the Ocean, that you would all know as Australia's national lived experience of suicide organisation. Now, we have a brilliant opening plenary for you this morning, and first up, it's my great honour to introduce you to Trish Hodge, proud Palawa woman from Nita Education, to welcome us to Muwinina country. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. Ya Pulingina Milaidina Manamapali too. Mina Milaidina Trubuwe, Mina Milaidina Turanomera Mina. Mina Palawa Milaidina Muwinina. Milaidina Kani Nipaluna. Ningimpi Manamapali, Nangampi Manamapali, Warrantamai Pia Naramapali, Paiwutania Kara. Tunapri, Tapudi Milaidina, Tunapri, Tapudi Kunani, Tunapri, Tapudi Lina, Tunapri, Tapudi Tim Timili Mananya, Tapudi Muka, Tunapri, Tapudi Warankili. Ningimpi Manamapali, Nangampi Manamapali, Warrantamai Pia Naramapali, Paiwutania Kara. Warranta Takara, Milaidina, Naramapali Takara, Milaidina Nika, Milaidina Mana, Warranta Palawa, Milaidina Nika, Nari Ninatu. So welcome to all of you, welcome to Muwinina country. This country is also called Nipaluna or Hobart. My country is Trubulwe in the northeast and Turanomeramena on the east coast, and I live on Malakadi country. And our knowledge to Ngāpri travels through the country, the Milaidina, from the top of Kunanyu, Mount Wellington, through the freshwater, the Lina, to Timtimili Mananya, the river, out to the Muka, the ocean, and up into Warankili in the sky. And Putia Pawa means it's never finished. So our knowledge will always be here in the country. And our ancestors, Ningimpi and Ningampi, they're all around us and they give us our dreaming. And we are this country and this country is us. Nari Ninatu is thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful summit and enjoy your time here in Lutruwita, Tasmania. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Trish, for that wonderful welcome to country. That's okay, Trish does have to leave us, but we're very grateful for you having been here. It's so important for us to be welcomed to country by Tasmania's First Peoples, so our heartfelt gratitude to you for joining us. And on behalf of Roses in the Ocean, I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here in the room today as well, and especially recognise the important contribution to suicide prevention that you make as well. Now, I have some unfortunate news that Roses in the Ocean's much-loved founder and CEO, Bronwyn Edwards, is unable to be with us due to a family matter. However, we're very pleased to bring you this video message from Bronnie. So thanks, Tom. We'll have a look at that now.
Hi everybody, my name's Bronnie Edwards. I'm the CEO of Roses in the Ocean, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Lived Experience Summit 2023. In recognition of the deep history and culture of Tasmania, I'd like to acknowledge the Muinina people, the traditional owners of the land upon which you're all gathered there today. Where I am at the moment recording this message for you is in Brisbane and the lands of the Turrbal and Yuggera people. I'd also like to acknowledge people with lived experience of suicide, the people who have experienced suicidal thoughts, survived a suicide attempt, supported a loved one through suicidal crisis or been bereaved by suicide. When I was preparing for the fact that I may not be able to be with you in person today, I reflected on the words of French philosopher Albert Camus, recipient of the 1957 Nobel Prize in Literature. He said, "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer, and that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back." The words ring true for me at this time as I find myself unable to be with you in person for Lived Experience Summit 2023, as the world is pushing hard on my family right now. I am where I need to be though at this moment in time, and I'm here knowing completely in my heart that all of you are the something stronger that is pushing right back. There's work to be done and connections to be made and amazing discussions to be had. Knowing that you will all be doing that and so much more across the course of the next 2 days makes me happy. It feels to me that we are really in a point of time in world's history where cultural transformation is actually swift enough that we as individuals can genuinely expect to be part of it on a global scale. Culture has influenced how humans survive and evolve for millennia. The prolific American novelist Tom Robbins suggests that our greatest human adventure is evolution, and we are in this life to enlarge the soul, liberate the spirit, and light up the brain. To this end, I think it's fair to say that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity right now to change the course of suicide prevention, to collectively reimagine through the leadership of people with lived experience how people experiencing distress and suicidal crisis wish to be supported, how people who've made an attempt to end their life need and want themselves and their loved ones wrapped in support and scaffolded with supports that work with them as they address the underlying causes of their distress. How the friends, family and kin of people in crisis or after an attempt can be supported, encouraged and empowered, and how people who lose loved ones through suicide can be gently guided to reconnect with a life without them. The culture shift required is substantial. It requires us to change the way decisions are made and who makes them. It requires courage to design governance structures that keep ourselves and others to account. And it requires us to move away from a power-based playing field to a collaborative, respectful and compassionate one. And everyone here has a role to play, and lives depend on it. We have to get it right as we can imagine it now, and then be continuously open to making it even better. So it's time for me to stop talking and let you get on with it. But just before I do, I'd like to thank all of our wonderful sponsors who have made this event possible. It is so wonderful to be hosting it in beautiful Tasmania. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank publicly the team at Roses in the Ocean who have all contributed to how you will experience Lived Experience Summit 2023. And they've done so under the magnificent leadership and guidance of our Head of Lived Experience Engagement and Integration, Nicola Parry. The program is packed with a selection of diverse workshops whose various hosts are excited to translate the work that you do here into real life impacts. I wish you all a fabulous 2 days of connecting with each other, learning from each other and inspiring each other. I so wish I could be with you all. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. I know we're all sending our love and support to Bronnie from here at the summit. Now, although she's far too modest to mention this herself, I'd just like to add that in January of this year, Bronnie's long-standing leadership in suicide prevention was recognised with her appointment by the Governor-General as a member of the Order of Australia, We're so proud of her leadership, and we're so pleased that that leadership has been honoured in this way. So please take a moment to celebrate that recognition and show your congratulations to Bronnie as well. Now, before we go on, like Bronnie, I'd like to honour all of you here who have lived experience of suicide, whether living with suicidal thinking, having made a suicide attempt, caring for someone experiencing suicidal distress, or being bereaved by suicide. You are all welcome here at the Lived Experience Summit. We remember all those we've lost to suicide, and we reflect on the impact of suicide on families and communities. So thank you for using your power to inform and influence and enhance suicide prevention. Now, a bit of housekeeping before we go on. So restrooms are located on either side of this room, the grand ballroom. You'll find a disabled restroom to the left of the ballroom, and you'll find a gender-neutral restroom to the right of the ballroom. In the event of an emergency requiring evacuation, please make your way downstairs and out to Dunn Place car park on Campbell Street, which I believe is this street adjacent to the hotel. And to help promote a safe and inclusive space for everyone, please be kind to yourself and to others over the next 2 days. Now, if you need a break, you can visit the Wellbeing Zone, which is located in Harbourview Room 2, which is over in this direction. And that's a quiet space for those who need some time to take a pause. And if you need support at any time, peer care companions and standby support workers are wearing orange name tags. And they are located both at the Roses in the Ocean stand and in the Wellbeing Zone. And there'll also be standby support workers at the back of the grand ballroom, so this room, for all of the full summit sessions where we're all together in this room. And my personal favourite, there will be therapy dogs running around looking for a pat and a cuddle during the breaks, so please indulge them, it'll be good for you. Now, although we understand that no one here would intentionally use language to bring distress to others, please be mindful of the conversations we'll have by using non-stigmatising and safe language and refraining from referring to suicide methods while we're here. And please note, a photographer and a videographer will be capturing images and footage during the summit as well. Now, next on our agenda, we have a video message from Australia's Assistant Minister for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, the Honourable Emma McBride. So thanks, Tom.
Hello, I'm Emma McBride, Assistant Minister for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention and Assistant Minister for Rural and Regional Health. Parliament is sitting in Canberra today, so I can't join you in person at the Roses in the Ocean Lived Experiences of Suicide Summit. A special thank you to the summit organisers for the opportunity to send a short message. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which the summit is taking place and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to other First Nations people at the summit and acknowledge the Ngunnawal people of the land on which I'm recording this message today. In doing so, I recognise the disparity in access to healthcare faced by First Nations people, especially in remote communities, which is why I'm proud to be part of a government that's committed to implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. Voice, treaty, truth. I also want to acknowledge the individual and collective contributions of people with the lived and living experience of suicide and those who love, have loved, and care for them. I acknowledge the individual and collective contributions you have made and welcome your insights and depth of understanding. The Albanese government is committed to making sure people with lived experience of suicide contribute to the suicide prevention system in service design and delivery, research and policy. The government is already working to make sure the voices of people with lived experience are represented and amplified in both the mental health and suicide prevention sectors. Recently, the government hosted the Mental Health Equity and Access Forum in Canberra. I was determined to see the voice of lived experience in the room, and in the end, they made up the largest cohort, over a dozen of the 80 attendees. At this forum, Health Minister Mark Butler and I announced funding to support those with a lived or living experience of mental ill health and suicide, to shape the policies and programs affecting them. This includes the establishment and operation of 2 independent national mental health lived experience peak bodies, one representing people accessing services and the other representing carers, families and kin, and additional funding towards Lived Experience Australia to continue its work to lead lived experience research and build the capacity of consumers and carers. Additional funding will also be directed towards a regular stakeholder forum to increase transparency, accountability, and partnership with the sector. This funding will help address gaps in Australia's mental health and suicide prevention systems and reaffirms our government's commitment to create the services people with lived experience need and want to be able to access. We know that suicide is complex and a multi-sectoral approach is needed to strengthen individuals, communities, social and economic factors which contribute. This is one of the reasons the National Suicide Prevention Officers established the Lived Experience Partnership Group. This group, together with your insights through Roses in the Ocean, will play a key role in bringing the critical perspective of lived experience to the new National Suicide Prevention Strategy. It will help guide coordinated action across all governments, portfolios and communities. I would like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the team from Roses in the Ocean for their vision and passion in championing the voice and experience of people with lived experience of suicide. Your contribution is welcome and appreciated. Only through co-design and collaboration with those with lived experience will we realise the change we are all working towards. These initiatives and others will help address some gaps in the suicide prevention system and offer better options and support for people in distress, crisis, and bereaved through the tragedy of suicide. The lived experience movement, by its very nature, is a highly collaborative one. Your work over many years is appreciated. People with lived and living experience of suicide need to be at the centre of Australia's ongoing suicide prevention reform, policy discussions and action. I look forward to seeing the outcomes of your work at this summit and continuing to work with you to create a better support system. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You would have noted there that the Assistant Minister just told us that the Albanese government is committed to making sure that people with lived experience of suicide contribute to the suicide prevention system in service design and delivery, research and policy, and that people with lived experience of suicide need to be at the centre of Australia's ongoing suicide prevention reform, policy discussions and action. So I just wanted to repeat those 2 quotes to remind us of this unprecedented opportunity that's before us right now. We have a new National Office of Suicide Prevention, a new National Agreement for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, and a new National Strategy in development right now, and the expectation is that we will be at the centre of all of those processes. Now, like the Commonwealth Government, the Tasmanian Government is a sponsor of this summit, and we're delighted to have Tasmania's Minister for Community Services and Development, the Honourable Nick Street, with us, who I'll invite to the lectern to speak to us next. Please welcome Minister Nick Street.
Can I begin, excuse me, can I begin by, even though she's had to leave, thanking Trish very much for that welcome to country and acknowledging the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the original owners and ongoing custodians of the land on which we meet, and acknowledge their elders past and present. On behalf of the Premier and Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing, Jeremy Rockcliffe, and the Tasmanian Government, I welcome you all to the Roses in the Ocean Lived Experience of Suicide Summit for 2023, and welcome to beautiful Hobart. As politicians, we try and be passionate about everything we do, but I can assure you that this is an area that the Premier is incredibly passionate about, and if he wasn't in South Korea right now, he would be the one here representing the Tasmanian Government. I was recently at a celebration for the 60th anniversary of Lifeline in Australia. The Premier is a life member of Lifeline for the work that he's done both before and after entering politics, so I can assure you that this is an area that he pays particular attention to. As a government, we're pleased to support the summit, and I acknowledge and thank the founder and CEO of Roses in the Ocean, Bronwyn Edwards, and her team for hosting this important event. And just watching that video of Bronwyn, what an incredible leader she is. Can I also especially acknowledge those who have a personal experience of suicidal distress and suicidality, the family, friends and carers of people in distress and people grieving those they have lost. We recognise the significance of suicide prevention and mental health for all Tasmanians. The Premier has elevated mental health and suicide prevention to a Premier's priority for the first time so that we can take a whole of government and whole of community approach to this issue. This allows us to bring all levels of government, agencies and people across the Tasmanian community and service system together to prevent suicide, supporting collaboration across all sectors. In December last year, the Premier launched Tasmania's Suicide Prevention Strategy for 2023 to 2027. This strategy is strongly influenced by the voices of those who are impacted every day by experiences of living with suicidal distress and those who are supporting their loved ones. Like the Commonwealth Minister was just saying as well, lived experience should be at the heart of the design and delivery of suicide prevention, and that is why lived experience will continue to lead and guide the implementation of actions identified in the strategy. We're also working closely with the Australian Government under our bilateral schedule for mental health and suicide prevention to build on existing resources and implement initiatives to improve suicide prevention services, such as aftercare support for people who have made a suicide attempt. I also acknowledge the work that Roses in the Ocean are currently undertaking in the Tasmanian community of Cygnet, which is in my electorate of Franklin, with a community-led safe space for people in distress or crisis, providing compassionate peer support for outside of working hours. The Tasmanian Government looks forward to hearing about the discussions and ideas developed here over the next couple of days and working with you to ensure we can better support our people, communities and services now and into the future. Again, thank you all for making the effort to be here and for your commitment to making a difference. I hope you enjoy your time in Hobart, connecting with colleagues and friends and learning from each other. I wish you all a very successful summit and a safe visit to Tasmania. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We're so pleased to see the progress on suicide prevention in Tasmania, particularly through the new strategy. And we really appreciate you fitting us into your busy schedule this morning. I know you've got other engagements to get to and we'll be leaving shortly, but we appreciate the time you've been able to spend with us this morning. So next on our agenda, it is now my great pleasure to introduce the first of our two Rose Gold sponsors of the summit, a great partner to Roses in the Ocean, Everymind, and a very generous long-time ally of the lived experience of suicide movement, and a great friend to Roses in the Ocean as well, the director of Everymind, Jaylee Skean.
Good morning, everybody. How fantastic is it to be in beautiful Hobart for a lived experience of suicide summit, and it's so lovely to be joining with people again in person for the summit. And while I appreciate all of the wonderful work that the team did 2 years ago to have the summit run effectively as an online program, there's nothing better than hugging people in person that you haven't seen for a while. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, as well as all of the lands across Australia, and also those that are First Nations people from other countries and call Australia home, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And if I can, I just wanted to lean in and remind people that we're in for a bumpy road this year as we go to a referendum to vote on the voice to Parliament, and to be kind and compassionate as people lean into difficult conversations across the year, and be really mindful about the impact that those conversations are going to have on all of us, but particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Also acknowledging all of us here in the room who have a lived experience of suicide, and the diversity of that lived experience, that I think it is wonderful to come together with a collective humanity and to express and share, I guess, a collective wisdom and knowledge, but also taking the opportunity to also have to lean into the diversity of that experience, and also the different experiences that people have and the different opportunities that people have or don't have to be at the centre of some of those decisions and some of those discussions that we're all having. Everymind's are really proud to be a Rose Gold. I like the sound of that. I really quite like Rose Gold. So I'd say we chose it because I thought that was the most appealing to me. But we don't have money to give away willy-nilly. We're not that way funded. So we really sat down as a senior leadership team and decided that for this year, this was the event that we would contribute money to, mainly because we've partnered with Roses in the Ocean for so long. I think it was just Bronnie on her own when we'd first partnered with Roses in the Ocean before she had a board or any other staff. And so it's a testament to that partnership and that relationship, but also the importance of the work more broadly and the leadership role that Roses in the Ocean and all of the people that feel part of the Roses in the Ocean family contribute to our work and the collective work that we do together in suicide prevention. And so there are so many opportunities that organisations and individuals had benefited from because of Roses in the Ocean and its growth and influence over that now, I think, 12 years. And I'd also like to say, I'm very disappointed, as I'm sure many of you are, that Bronnie's not here in person. She probably would have beat Justin out for the most number of hugs here at the summit over the next couple of days. But leadership comes in many forms, and one form of leadership is actually to step back and focus on our own lives and what's a priority for us when the time's right, and a great opportunity for her team to lead here in the next couple of days, and they will do an amazing job, we all know. At Every Mind, we have a vision for empowering people and organisations to implement change for themselves, for each other and for the future. And this is one area, integrating the lived experience of suicide into our planning, into our research, into our programs, into our service delivery, into our reform and into our policy, that's critically important for all organisations, including ours. We're on a learning journey like everybody else, which was the other reason we wanted to be actively involved in this particular summit. And we've got a number of members of our team and our senior leadership team from Every Mind who are here this week. And one of our team is behind the camera, who's a member of the Roses in the Ocean network, but he's also one of our comm staff at Every Mind, so be very nice to him as he's walking around. Just, I guess, one thing I wanted to leave you with is I was re-listening to a podcast I've listened to twice in the last couple of weeks because I forgot to download something new before I got on the flight from Newcastle on Tuesday. But I was listening to an interview between Brené Brown and Chris Germer, which was actually on fierce compassion. It was a two-parter. I'd recommend it. I really enjoyed listening to it the second time as much as the first. But in part of that, they were talking about the definition of wisdom. And Chris Germer was talking about the different concepts of wisdom from both the East and the West. And so in the East, wisdom refers to insights into the complexity and the interdependence of all things. But in the West, people often talk about wisdom in more practical terms, so the kind of pragmatic actions you take to find a way through with the knowledge that you have. And so if you bring those two East and West concepts together, then wisdom is seeing the complexity of things, but also actively finding a way through that complexity. And so I thought that was a really nice framing for the next 2 days, is for everyone to think about the collective wisdom that's here, to lean into the complexity of the things that we're discussing, but also actively working together to find a way through. Have a great 2 days.
Thank you so much for that, Jaylee. I'd now like to introduce our next Rose Gold sponsor, Mates in Construction, whose work in the construction, mining and energy industries is well known and truly pioneering in suicide prevention. So please welcome Mates in Construction CEO Chris Lockwood.
I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today, the elders past, present and emerging, and genuinely hope that we can move to a place of honest partnership. And I really appreciate the words that Jaylee put there in terms of the discussions that are going to be happening across our whole community this year in terms of the voice. It is a time for us all to be open, honest, but fair and genuinely compassionate in terms of how we engage in these discussions. And in terms of being a Rose Gold sponsor, I don't know whether it was 23 years ago that I put a Rose Gold ring on my finger that sees us being here today, but that's not the case. It's because the lived experience, building lived experience into what we do at Mates is actually really core to how we work. We started about 15 years ago in the construction industry when those working in the industry realised that suicide was a problem in construction. Rates of suicide were more than 2 times higher than in and outside the industry. But importantly, what was realised was that this was a problem that we could do something about by working together. At that point, the industry actually did turn to someone who had a lived experience of suicide and a lived experience of working in the industry to establish a program to support all of us in terms of working together to make a difference on the ground. And the MATES program is based on a very simple concept, and that idea is that suicide is everyone's business. It's something that we can all do something about. If the building and construction industry is going to do something to improve mental health and wellbeing of workers and to reduce the incidence of suicide, then it can't be left to clinicians and mental health professionals alone. Everyone must play their part. And for that to work, we knew it couldn't be something that was going to be delivered top-down through employers and businesses alone. That to make it effective, it needed to be trusted and owned by everyone in the workplace, built from the ground up. And that's why MATES uses a community development model aimed at the workplace. And I know that's something that's really aligned with the way that Roses actually work in terms of trying to build those skills, that knowledge, that informed experience into all of our communities. So we're built on that genuine ownership by the industries, and central to that program, to how we work, is that wide buy-in from our partners, our workers, the unions, employer associations, the businesses themselves. That's what actually allows a place of trust and collaboration to actually form. And that's actually the permission, that's where the permission really makes a difference in terms of being able to deliver something that actually can make a difference. And thankfully, we do know that the work is actually making a difference, impacting on the ground where we work. And that's from the feedback from the 25,000 plus connector, Safe Talk trained volunteers that we've actually got across workplaces around the country. And they are active in the communities that they live in and they work in. Their workplace, but their football clubs, their netball clubs, their churches, their synagogues, wherever they might live and work. That's where we need to put the skills for all of us to be stronger as a community. The reason MATES has been able to actually continuously grow the footprint of the program, and it is across a number of industries now, it's because we're building communities of care in our workplaces. But the reason we have been able to grow and be successful is because from the very start, lived experience has informed the work that we actually do. And we know that keeping a genuine focus on lived experience on informing the work that we do is actually vitally important. That's why we're here at this summit. And that's why we also genuinely value working with Bronwyn and the Roses team more broadly. I know we've got shared values and commitment in this space, and I'm open to my learning over the next couple of days. But I really want everyone here to make the most of the summit. There's so much we can achieve to progress our work of suicide prevention by working together and taking the time to learn from each other. So to learn from the lived experience of suicide in our communities and wherever they are and however they are formed. That's what I want to do, and I know that that's something that drives so many of us that are here today. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be able to achieve together, and I'm rapt to be here in Tasmania. When I hop off the plane and breathe in that air, I know we're in a good place, so we'll be able to do good things. Thanks, everyone.
So thank you for that, Chris. And thank you again to both of our Rose Gold sponsors, Everymind and Mates in Construction. And thank you to all our sponsors for your generous support of this summit. We really could not hold the summit without all of our sponsors supporting us. So now we're going to turn to a series of really exciting discussions from three of Australia's outstanding lived experience advocates, Emily Unity, Caroline Allen, and Mitch McPherson. And each of these speakers will be focusing on one of the themes of accessibility, suitability, and sustainability of suicide prevention for people with lived experience of suicide. Now, we also have an interactive element to these presentations. Following each presentation, you can participate in a summit-wide conversation by responding to a question relevant to the presentation's theme via Slido. So we invite everyone to join that conversation by going to slido.com on your phone or your laptop's browser and entering the event code, which you may have seen scrolling earlier. It's hashtag 2588054. I'll say that again, hashtag 2588054. However, you can also use your phone's camera to scan the QR code that's going to be displayed against each of the questions when they come up on the main screen here. And if you scan that QR code, that will take your phone directly to Slido for the question at that time. Now, you'll have a very short time in between each of the presentations to give your reflections on that question. So you can enter a short phrase or even just a single word. And all of our responses are going to be put into a word cloud that will come up on the main screens here. So we'll all be seeing all of our thoughts about those themes in real time. I hope you enjoy these presentations. I've been really looking forward to hearing from these three speakers. And to kick us off, to talk about accessibility, please welcome Emily Unity.
Hey everyone, my heart's beating really quickly. My name's Emily, my pronouns are they, them. I have lived and living experiences of suicide as well as bereaving both family and friends of suicide. Before I dig in, I'd like to acknowledge I'm speaking on the lands of the Muwinina people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and especially extend that respect to any First Nations people in the room here today. I want to acknowledge how important it is that we emphasise decolonising suicide prevention services and how important it is that we learn from First Nations wisdom. Today I'll be talking about the accessibility of suicide prevention services. Often when I see people talk about accessibility, it's often only through sort of one lens. But today I really want to go a lot deeper and look at accessibility through 10 different lenses that are really important to my lived and living experiences. I'm going to describe what's on the screen for you today. I'm a very visual person. There's a circle that's divided into 10 parts. Each of these parts represents a different way that we can look at accessibility. I'm going to call them accessibility lenses for today. I'm going to share just 10 accessibility lenses that are really important to me, including some of my lived and living experiences. Of course, they are not all the accessibility lenses in the world, but these are just 10 that are really important to me. I believe that we are each the experts of our own experience. So whilst I'm talking, I'd love for you to reflect on your own experiences and see maybe the similarities or the differences between our experiences. The first lens I'd like to talk about is ability. Whilst I am an able-bodied person, I do have an invisible disability. I'm autistic, and many suicide prevention services have been incredibly inaccessible for my disability, whether it be the brightness of the lights, or the loudness of the sounds, or the texture of bed sheets, or even the communication style of professionals. So for this lens of ability, I've put the accessibility of services as really low. The next lens is age. Being a young person, not many services I've found are very age appropriate. I often get handballed between services as my age doesn't necessarily fit within certain categories, but the age lens hasn't affected my experience of accessibility nearly as badly as the ability lens, so I've rated that pretty low, but not as low as ability. The next lens is culture. In my experience, suicide prevention services are really not culturally appropriate. There are very few culturally diverse workers and peer workers within suicide prevention services, and for me, despite many years of seeking help, I still haven't found a worker that actually looks like me. Additionally, there is a severe lack of multicultural understandings of mental health more widely, but especially suicide. So I've rated this accessibility lens really, really low. Whoop, sorry. Your sneak preview. The next lens is diagnoses. My diagnoses have affected my experiences with suicide prevention services in a pretty mixed way. Sometimes they help me get to the right service a little bit quicker, but sometimes I've been misdiagnosed and handballed to different services, and it's made it really impossible to seek help. So I've rated this accessibility lens around the middle. The next lens is finance. At this point in my life, if I really need to, I can afford most suicide prevention services, not comfortably, but without worrying about whether I'll have enough money for food or housing. But this was definitely not the case for most of my life. So currently I've rated this accessibility lens pretty high. The next lens is gender. I'm femme-presenting and assigned female at birth, but I identify as non-binary. And in my experience, seeking any sort of suicide prevention support is almost guaranteeing me to be misgendered, which I can definitely handle on my good days, but when I'm in crisis, it's actively harmful. So I rated this accessibility lens really low. The next lens is housing. Currently, I have pretty stable housing, but I also have multiple lived experiences of homelessness and domestic violence. So sometimes if I'm discharged from an inpatient stay, I might not have a safe place to go to afterwards. Housing is a pretty tricky one for me because it tends to fluctuate, but based on my current situation, I've rated this accessibility lens fairly high. The next lens is immigration. I was born in Australia, over in Perth. My mum is a Vietnamese refugee and my dad's a Malaysian migrant. Whilst I am a citizen, I've never had to worry about immigration and health for me, but I have lots of family and friends that have been really scared of seeking help, particularly when it regards to suicide prevention services, because of fear of deportation or fear of being migrated elsewhere. Whilst I personally haven't had this experience, I'm also a young carer, and so it affects the experience of many people that I care for. So I've rated this accessibility lens really high for me, but I've removed a bit because of the people that I care for. Next is language. Because I was born in Australia, English is my native language. However, mental health literacy was something that I definitely was not taught. In fact, much of my family and cultural supports didn't even believe in the concept of mental health, let alone have the language to even speak about it. So for a really long time, even though I could speak fluent English, I couldn't communicate about anything that I was experiencing. Because of my lack of mental health literacy, I didn't know most suicide prevention services even existed or that I deserved help. And whenever I rocked up at a service out of crisis, I didn't have the language to ask for the help that I needed. However, currently, I work as a mental health professional, and I've learned the language to communicate my experiences, so because of my current circumstances, I've rated this really high. And the last lens I'd like to share with you today is trauma. And I mean trauma from negative experiences of suicide prevention services. Boy, oh boy, do I have those. I have so many triggers and trauma from my support-seeking experiences. And I think that my trauma makes even seeking new help or new different types of services almost nearly impossible. Because even if a new service looks even a little bit like a previous experience, it's really scary to seek any sort of help. So I've rated this accessibility lens really low. In conclusion, those are my 10 very quick accessibility lenses for today. Before I wrap up, I really want to point out that they are not entirely separate lenses. Often they overlap. They create these intersectional experiences of accessibility, and they can become increasingly complex. It's not like they just add on to each other, but they catalyze each other and color each other in different complex ways. So my experience isn't just one of these lenses, it's all of them, all the time. And I think we need to think about accessibility through that sort of mixed and complex lens. Something I'd love for you to consider is, what are your accessibility lenses? What are the differences between your story and mine? I really do believe that we are each the experts of our own experience. I can only speak from my experience, but I really would love for you to share your experience in this conversation as well. I think that we can learn so much from and with each other, and that's the only way that we can create suicide prevention services that are truly accessible for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. That was both remarkable and challenging, so thank you so much. I love the accessibility lenses, so really brilliant. Now, please go to Slido. There's your QR code if you need to use that. You have about 2 minutes to answer our first interactive question, which is, how can people as individuals advocate to make suicide prevention support and services more available? You'll see the word cloud starting to form there. How can people as individuals advocate to make suicide prevention support and services more available? Some fantastic responses starting to fill out the word cloud there, which isn't surprising given we've had such a thought-provoking presentation. Okay, it looks like we might be reaching a natural plateau, perhaps. There's always plenty more discussion to be had. So at this point, I'm going to just move us on from our Slido question and call my dear friend Caroline Allen up to the lectern to talk to us about suitability. So please welcome Caroline.
I really like that somebody put on their speak even if your voice shakes, because I am really nervous right now, so that's awesome. So, hi, I'm Caroline, and somehow I scored this gig about talking about the suitability of current suicide prevention services. I'm a person with a lived experience of suicide, which for me means that I've survived multiple suicide attempts and continue to live with chronic suicidal ideation. My story is long and complicated and, well, quite frankly, not all that interesting, but suffice to say that over the years, mental health professionals have labelled me with all sorts of psychiatric diagnoses. However, I believe that my way of being in the world is a perfectly normal reaction to some highly abnormal situations. I believe that my way of being in the world makes sense in the context of my story. There are two fun facts that you need to know about me, because these have shaped my experiences with mental health and suicide prevention services over the years. Consequently, they also shape my view about the suitability of current suicide prevention services. The first thing you need to know about me is that I am autistic. I figured this out in 2013 and then paid a clinical psychologist a whole lot of money to tell me what I already knew. Not one of the bazillion mental health professionals who I'd seen across dozens of inpatient psychiatric hospitalisations had picked up on the tinsy tiny little detail that I'm autistic. My world would be very different now if they had. And sadly, I know that this part of my story is not uncommon. Wow, I'm shaking so much, I'm making the thing shake. Check that out. Thank you. The second thing you need to know about me is that I live with some very significant trauma-related issues. And you see, the tricky thing is that most of these issues now are due to my experiences with mental health professionals and services, rather than due to the events that brought me into contact with those services in the first place, way back in 1996. There's a quote by the American writer and civil rights activist, Maya Angelou, that I super like. Maya said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." I truly believe that everyone who works in suicide prevention is doing the best they can. However, based on my experiences of services, I also know that we need to do better. Due to far too many encounters with unhelpful helping people, I no longer reach out to suicide prevention services. There's only so many times I could survive being hung up on by crisis support lines after being told to call back when I was less distressed. There's only so many times that I could seek help at the hospital emergency department, only to be told that I was attention-seeking and a waste of resources. There's only so many times that I could be forcibly held in a psychiatric inpatient unit when I knew that I didn't need to be there, or conversely, refused entry to a psychiatric unit when I knew I really did need to be there. I just can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. For many years now, the only time I end up in the emergency department is when someone calls 000 against my wishes. The last time that happened I spent 4 hours tied to a bed in the emergency department, and then I was sent home with nothing more than a fresh layer of muddle added to my already very multi-layered muddle. So, given this, what does a suitable suicide prevention service look like to me? For me to feel safe enough to use a service, they would have to be able to give me a 100% guarantee that they wouldn't call 000 on me. And herein lies the eternal puzzle, doesn't it? Because can any service ever really give such a guarantee? The last time I reached out to a service when in suicidal crisis was several years ago. I thought I'd found a helpful helping service. It was a drop-in centre for people with mental health issues. I visited the service when I wasn't in crisis and had a chat to one of the workers there. I explained what it can look like when I'm in crisis, and they assured me that this would be totally fine. I really thought I'd found a safe place to go when I was swamped by a wave of suicidal ideation. A few weeks later, I was in crisis, and I managed to get myself to this drop-in centre. When one of the workers answered the door, I managed to tell him that I needed a quiet room and someone to stay with me while I regulated some very big feelings. I was so clear, I couldn't have been clearer. I was able to articulate exactly what I needed. They showed me into a room and I laid down on the floor and started to cry and make a whole lot of noise, which is my normal when I'm in crisis. When the giant wave of emotion started to settle, I opened my eyes and sat up to discover that I was alone in a darkened room with the door shut. This triggered the awful memories of being locked in seclusion at the hospital, and I started screaming and opened the door. A group of the workers was milling around and asked me what my surname was. I knew what that meant, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, a paramedic turned up. He and I kind of stared at each other blankly, and in the end, he was happy for me to go home. The whole situation was absurd, and it was the last time I ever went to any service seeking help when in suicidal crisis. Please don't ever be the reason someone gives up on trying to find helpful help. It was after this incident that it began to dawn on me that as an autistic person, when I am flooded with giant feelings, I think I might present a little bit differently to how a neurotypical person presents. And I think this might be a key part of my model. I get the sense that a lot of people get scared of the way I present when I'm in crisis, and this is why I've had so many awful experiences of having emergency services called. For those of you who work directly with people in suicidal distress, I am curious to know how confident you are that you can support people who present in atypical ways. Is your service suitable for autistic people like me? Is it suitable for people of different cultural backgrounds? Is it suitable for people with physical or intellectual disabilities? Can a person who uses a wheelchair even get through your front door? Moving in the suicide prevention space as I do, I am now very fortunate to have several people who I know I can call when I'm in crisis. The people on my safe calling list are people who I know will simply stay on the phone. They can't fix my muddle because my muddle is extremely muddled. These are people who know my story. They know that I was in a complicated relationship with my psychologist for 16 years. They know that he told me I was too fucked up for anyone else to treat. They know that since leaving him, I have seen 17 therapists in 7 years, with each one proving to be a less helpful helping person than the previous one. They know that I've tried, they know that I've really tried, and they know that I'm tired now. So when I am riding a giant wave of suicidal despair, there is no "have you thought about X" or "have you tried Y?" There are no hopelessly inadequate suggestions such as, "Why don't you take a bath, listen to music, do some colouring in?" There are no platitudes of "you're so resilient," or "you're so brave." There is nothing but their presence, and thus far their presence has been enough. To me, this is what supportive support looks like, and it is something I am yet to find in any service. However, I do have great hope that the Roses Suicide Prevention Safe Spaces are a step in the right direction. I think one of the greatest challenges for these safe spaces and other newly emerging services is how to balance the aspirational principles of trauma-informed care with the legal principle of duty of care. I find it super frustrating the way the term trauma-informed care seems to get tossed around like a buzzword. Every service these days seems to be trauma-informed, along with also being person-centred, culturally sensitive, and recovery-orientated. So many buzzwords. But just like these other terms, trauma-informed care is more than a buzzword, and I could happily talk about it for the rest of the day. But suffice to say, the 5 key principles of trauma-informed care are safety, trust, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. And to me, the great puzzle is, how can a service truly claim to work by these principles if it also at times calls emergency services against the wishes of a client or guest? This is tricky, and I suggest that anyone who thinks the answer is simple hasn't yet thought hard enough about the question. I certainly don't have the answer yet. And I recognise that for many guests of a safe space, this wouldn't be a major issue. But it's an issue for me, and I am not that special. I know that I am not alone in having had truly horrendous experiences in emergency departments and public psychiatric units when in suicidal crisis. So, are current suicide prevention services suitable? Well, given that one of the themes for the conference is to create change, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that perhaps they're not as suitable as they could be. For those of you who work in services, is your service suitable? Is it suitable for everyone who comes through the door? Is it suitable to meet the oh-so-varied needs of each individual? Is it suitable for people like me who have already been so badly and repeatedly hurt by unhelpful helping people? How do we create services that are truly safe? I don't have the answer, but perhaps together over the next couple of days we can figure it out. All we can do is our best until we know better. Then, when we know better, we can do better. So let's go forth together and do better. Thank you. Yeah.
That was exceptional and groundbreaking and incredibly moving. So thank you for sharing so honestly and with such depth and with such intelligence. Caroline, you know that I'm already a long-time fan. I didn't think I could become a bigger fan, but I just did. And I truly honour your experiences and what you've shared with us this morning. Now, again, please go to Slido. Again, you've got just a couple of minutes to reflect on what we've just heard in the context of this question about suitability of services. How can suicide prevention support and services become more suitable for people who have already been harmed by other services? How can suicide prevention support and services become more suitable for people who have already been harmed by other services? got a lot of activity going on with this word cloud. I love the contribution, listen to Caroline. I can see that Listen to Caroline is actually growing larger on that screen, so there's it's obviously an increasing number of people entering that. Okay, I think we're starting to slow on our responses there. So thank you everyone for participating in the Slido there. And now for our final presentation on sustainability, please welcome Mitch McPherson.
Thank you so much. After this opening session, I'd like to have a quiet word with whoever scheduled me after Caroline. That would be outside. If we can just have a quiet moment, that would be great. Thank you. Honestly, Caroline said at the start that her story isn't very interesting. Absolutely how wrong you are, I'm sorry to say, but profoundly impactful, and I hope you continue finding the courage to share that and on a wider scale, because I know that we're all moved by that. And as I said, I'm very ungrateful that I had to come up after you and share my insights today. A common theme up on the stage today is definitely nerves. I have done a lot of public speaking over the last 8 or 9 years, and I always get nervous, and I always say that the main reason I get nervous is because I care. And I've always said that the day I stand up in front of an audience to share my story and I'm not nervous is the day that I'll put the mic in the rack and never ever do it again. But at the end of the day today, being in front of my peers, around 280 of them, and I think you mentioned at the start, the largest gathering of people with a lived experience ever in Australia is massive. So I'm certainly feeling the nerves as well, and my heart is beating out of my chest as well. Can I start by acknowledging first just that, the lived experience in the room, and take time to recognise that being in a room with so many amazingly brave people is an absolute honour, and that having the opportunity to speak and be involved in such an important event is something that I will not and never ever take for granted, so I'm very grateful for that. It is a pleasure to have been asked by Bron, who I'm certainly sending my well wishes to today and moving forward, to be part of today's opening plenary. And again, thank you to Emily and Carolina for also sharing your reflections and stories with us at the start. Today I want to use my short amount of time up here to highlight the importance of how those with a lived experience should always continue finding ways to remain sustainable in the roller coaster that is suicide prevention. I myself have a lived experience. My best friend and my younger brother took his life just on 10 years ago. A life-changing experience that I know will always haunt me, and the pain will always certainly never ever leave me. But as a person who now found a mental health organisation and travels the country sharing my story to help change the way others view mental health, I have fortunately found ways to use that pain that I established 10 years ago to drive me. I have found ways to let it motivate me, to inspire me, and to most importantly be a beacon of hope to others who may have or be going through a similar experience. I truly believe that our lived experience voices are needed if we are to continue making any sort of serious change across our country. But I also know that this work is tough. It's challenging, and at times it can be a very, very heavy burden. What I have learned is that the variety of lived experience that is present within advocates, services, groups, committees, and organisations in the space of mental health awareness and suicide prevention is vital for accessibility and meeting community needs. We add a layer of understanding to suicide that an expert who doesn't have a lived experience will never be able to fully appreciate. The challenge, however, in my opinion, is finding the ways to remain sustainable in the space when you do have that lived experience, because we all know it is not always easy to do. And so today I want to talk about not only the importance of lived experience being a key part of the services and support that is offered across the country, but also touch on the importance of why I believe that all of us working and volunteering in this space can benefit from understanding our true motivation as to why we do what we do. Some years ago, I lost my way. The grief that I was sharing in rooms full of audiences all of a sudden became pretty hard to bear. I was lost, I was scared, and I was worried that the organisation and the change that I was making was falling apart right in front of my own eyes. I was in communities across various states across our country preaching self-care and for people to ask for help when they needed it. But all whilst doing that, I was neglecting myself, my own well-being, and I was slowly but surely unravelling as I continued to ignore the signs that I was burning myself out. As I navigated a way back and finally took some time for myself, it was in that moment of vulnerability when I was asked a question that I'd never ever been asked before. Mitch, what is the real reason that you get out of bed and challenge yourself each day to be a mental health advocate and a suicide prevention advocate also? Now, I am not often lost for words, but in that moment I was, because I realised I didn't really understand the importance of what I was lacking at that time in my life. And so then began the heavy lifting to discover my why. Because to remain in this space and to continue breaking down the barriers for others, I knew I needed to become really clear of my ongoing motivation. So nowadays, before I begin every presentation, I share with my audience my why. A reminder to the audience to be kind to me as I embark on reliving a traumatic experience, but for me, an injection of courage before I open my mouth and go back to the moments that changed my life forever. My why, firstly, is my mum and dad and the pain that they will always walk with, and the sad reality that their life will never ever be the same. Every time I think of my parents, it saddens me, Exhibit A. But it quickly becomes a reminder that I have the opportunity to be part of the prevention for other parents who may experience this pain and suffering by standing in front of them and sharing with them my story. Here's where I might get more emotional. I also mentioned my two young children, Maya and Isaac. I will note that Isaac's 7 months, and I watched him being born from a San Diego hotel 7 months ago, so that's a story for another day. We got off to a wonderful start. Who obviously, along with my wife, means so much to me. The world we live in continues to bring so many challenges and barriers, particularly for young people. Working out who we are as a young person, what career path we want to go down, the pressures from our peers and our parents to make something of ourselves, bullying, choosing the right people to surround ourselves with. It is not easy for a young person to navigate life. So if I can continue paving a kinder and more understanding world for them, their friends, their cousins, and that next generation coming through, that gives me the strength to relive my pain each time. In my life now, when I feel challenged, low, sad, afraid, or when I doubt myself, I think of my why. And I know that as long as I have that, I will remain sustainable in the work that I do, because I know that that gives me courage to face any of these emotions that will continue to come my way. So my point to everyone here today is this. If us lived experience advocates take the time to better understand what our why is, I have nothing but faith that we will find it. We have experienced the pain, and for some, continue to live with the thoughts of suicide often. We know the loved ones and friends affected, and they are likely to be part of our why and what can drive us and give us our ongoing strength. Something I also wanted to highlight today, and maybe to also throw the challenge out to professional service providers, is how much they are valuing, prioritising and incorporating lived experience in the way they create, expand and deliver their services. Is lived experience incorporated into their collective why? Are they grabbing the opportunity to utilise the passion, the learnings, the strength and the unique perspectives of those with lived experience with the amazing work that they are already doing across our country? There is so much value to be expanded upon with the mental health suicide prevention sector by hearing from and empowering those who understand the landscape on a much deeper level. There are so many touch points throughout the service delivery models that lived experience could play an impactful role within, and also develop new models or variation to meet the communities and challenging ongoing needs. I believe bringing lived experience to more of the deliberations about service delivery will assist in making services more sustainable in continuing to deliver the important work that they do. Nationally, there is growing encouragement, as we've heard today, to incorporate the power of lived experience into their work. And if you're asking me why that is because we are strong. We are courageous, we are brave, and we believe more change can be done. So let's all be part of the continued movement, advocating for lived experience representatives to have a seat at the table, being part of the decisions and to pioneer our way forward to support our communities when it comes to mental health and suicide prevention. I ask you today and over the next 2 days to find your why, continue to be brave, and have a wonderful couple of days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mitch. That was really stirring and incredibly honest as well, so greatly appreciated. I'm very sorry for your loss, but I'm also really pleased for Maya and Isaac that they've got you, so well done. Now we have our final Slido question following Mitch's presentation. And our final question is, what is most needed for suicide prevention support and services to be more sustainable? So lots of thought-provoking points raised in Mitch's presentation there. Finding our why is definitely an important message for us over the next 2 days. What is most needed for suicide prevention support and services to be more sustainable? Lots of important ideas there, but of course we've got funding right in the centre. Some really important points there about both our sustainability as a sector and a movement, but also our individual sustainability doing this work. So I think we're starting to slow down on the Slido responses there. Thank you everyone for contributing to those 3 questions. And I think you'll all agree that's been a riveting start to the Lived Experience Summit. So thank you so much, Emily, Caroline and Mitch, for those lived experience presentations. And thank you to all of our speakers this morning. Thank you again to all of our sponsors as well for all of your support. We're actually running a few minutes early, which I know Nicola is going to be so pleased about. Please take a little bit of extra time for morning tea, which will be just out in the mezzanine here. There's a lot of different stands for services out there as well for you to check out, as well as the wellbeing zone. Thank you everyone again for being here. Have a brilliant couple of days, and we'll see you back here in about half an hour or so. Thank you. Okay, let's enter our final session. So we can hopefully get out of here by 4, or not long afterwards anyway. Okay, now thank you everyone for sticking it out and staying as long as you have. It's great to see such a big crowd still here after the last 2 days. I hope everyone's had a good time. Yeah? Good. Okay, I've got a couple of just very quick housekeeping points to make first. There's been a set of car keys handed in at the front desk today, which were found in the men's toilets. They have a keyring of a Tasmanian radio station on them. So if you think they may be yours, please go to the front desk. And whoever's been in room number 317 at maybe Mac Q01, we've also got what looks like some room keys here as well. So you might be needing those. Okay. Now we have we've got 4 speakers, fantastic representatives of lived experience and our allies, who are going to give their reflections on the last 2 days for your consideration. As they're speaking, we are going to have Rachel from Swivel Creative giving us some real-time illustration of the points they raise. So that's going to be fantastic as well. And the first of these speakers is the irreplaceable Caroline Allen.
I don't have a prepared talk this time. Who knows what's going to come out? I'm scared. So it has been a pretty amazing couple of days, and I did want to say thank you for the many, many kind words that people have said to me. I deeply appreciate it, and thank you to the people who've shared their stories with me. For those of you who've lost someone to suicide, I am so sorry for your loss. And for those of you who have been trying to seek help for yourselves or for a loved one, I am so sorry that it is so hard. It should not be that hard, and hopefully we can create a better place so that in the future it isn't so hard. I hope that perhaps you might feel a little bit less alone when you are trying to find helpful help and supportive support, because it is not you. It is the system that's broken, and from the conversations I've had, there are a lot of people out there looking for helpful help and supportive support. You will remind me why I do this. We all know what's wrong with the system. I don't think we've said anything new or revolutionary over the last few days. We just need people to hear us. A lot of you have talked about how brave I am that I do this. I actually really like it. It's kind of cool. Because I want to change the world. And because there's a quote by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs once said that the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I am that crazy. And that is the reason I choose to stay alive. A lot of people talk about their reasons for living, and often that involves family. I don't have any family. I have no one. But I have a belief that I can change the world, and step 1 of changing the world is staying alive. So that is why I choose to stay alive. For the last few months, I've been struggling. In August last year, I had a slightly absurd situation. I was on the governance committee of a mental health organisation, and I'd been invited onto that committee because of my lived experience. I had a crisis within the building of that organisation, and I was consequently kicked off the committee. So I was invited onto the committee because of my lived experience, and I was kicked off the committee because of my lived experience. And that was on the 8th of August last year, and it has been very, very hard. There have been very, very dark times through that. And I was reflecting to Stephen yesterday when everyone's saying such nice words about me. I'm the same person as I was that day that I had that crisis. So I figure it's their loss, really, isn't it? So I guess, again, just finishing with that quote by Steve Jobs, it is the thing that keeps me alive. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I don't know about you, but I am totally that crazy. Thank you.
Okay, next up, thank you, Caroline. Next up is our good friend Adriel Burley. Thank you, Adriel.
Yes, well, I suppose I reflect on the last few days and say, in some respects, it's been a bit of a post-COVID reunion. We often have seen each other online, but we actually see the top half of each other now and have to engage with each other in that way. I found it exhausting to start with, and I felt also the sense and the weight of expectation about the challenges that we face. And we've heard that from our first speeches on the first day. I wanted you to reflect on one thing which carries across all the things that I've heard and others have heard. Our lived experience is in itself a rebirth. If we talk about a child being born, it's the first 1,000 days that counts the most. And in our regard, it's that we've come into a new world after our experiences. Those experiences have shaped us. We've learned to speak to be understood. We've learned to walk and asked people to walk their talk at the same time. And certainly in this room, I'm filled with hope because people will always be willing and are able to learn to run the race. One of the key things about the group in the room today is that we've learned to face our mortality. So much of us have lived on that mortal coil more than most. And it brings me back to one of our first speakers, in the sense that we see our lenses, whether we're a farmer, whether we're a veteran, whether we're a mother of a bereaved person, whether from the LGBTI community or from the First Nations community. What I'm saying to you is that we live our lives through our lenses and people live their lives through ours. So be filled with hope. You are not alone here, and go back to run the race because it can be won.
Thank you so much for that, Adriel. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Auntie Vicky McKenna from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Lived Experience Centre. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't come up with without having to do an acknowledgement, so that's how I'm going to start. In my language, Yaro. Mabogurgari, ngayon nilawal Vicky McKenna, nyamba wiri arangan Yaro, ponwa nganjando. Yagara langan nyamba borojira, muinina ngan. Narigonel bukare garanguran. Jarijan Boromangra. I acknowledge the Moinina people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with these lands. I acknowledge all of our elders, past, present, and emerging leaders, and all of our other tribal groups represented here today. We are people from the Dreamtime forever and always. I would also like to acknowledge our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues, allies from around Australia who work alongside us in the lived experience and mental health and suicide prevention space. I would also like to take this time to acknowledge all of those with a lived experience here today. Thank you, Roses in the Ocean, for bringing people with lived experience together in a safe space to share and learn, and for inviting me to talk to you all about my lived experience from a First Nations perspective. As First Nations people, our experience of living have been passed down for thousands and thousands of years. It is how we survive, how we thrive, how we care for each other, and how we care for country. Experiences are our foundation of relationships, of knowledge, which we carry in our bones and in our spirit. We are all here today because we also are connected by our experiences, our lived experiences of suicide, of mental ill health, caring for others, and caring for community. I am here because I have my own lived experience of suicidality. I have lost members of my family to suicide and cared for many others. Past and ongoing colonization has meant that we have lost and continue to lose knowledge and relationships which we feel at both levels, community and nationally. For those with the lived and living experiences, you are your own experts of your life. And it is wonderful to see the growth of lived experience over the last few years, because for us as First Nations people, our lived experience is central and core to our existence. For government and other organizations in the room, being here shows your commitment to lived experience. You see this as important. As the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Lived Experience Centre, we're like a small fish in a big pond here, but we carry the weight of the ocean with us, the weight of thousands of years of experience and our ancestors and of our community, our loved ones, and the ones we have lost. I would like to leave this with you. How will you join us in making waves big enough that the rest of the country will see? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Vicky, and for that challenge to all of us at the end of your reflections there. And now our fourth and final speaker in these series of reflections is Jaylee Skean of Every Mind.
Thank you, Stephen. And even though I've seen so many people and connected with so many people across these 2 days, Vicky and I hadn't sat down and had a conversation, so I appreciate the 5 minutes we got sitting on stage. I don't know whether being asked to speak in the closing ceremony is an honour or a punishment, because I'm really tired. Hands up who else is feeling extremely tired. Yeah. Look, most of my staff are on a 9-day fortnight, including me, because we pretty much figure out that by the time you get to a Friday, what comes out of your mouth is usually pretty mushy, that your brain's done so much work. So I'm going to attempt to string some sentences together this afternoon. But before I do, just in case no one else is going to do this, can I hear 3 cheers for the Roses team, and including Stephen, I know, stepped in and done a number of sessions that Bronnie would have done. And so while we feel the loss of Bronnie, I think we feel the love and connection and warmth and the organisational skills of the whole Roses team and their peer care companion and other network that have kind of made this day possible. So if I can have 3 cheers for Roses. Hip hip, hip hip, hip hip. And I did tell Justin I was going to work on a rap or a dance or something, but I might leave the entertainment to him. So just a couple of reflections of things I just noted, because there were many. One is, I guess, the openness that people have come over the last 2 days to share their experience, and many people are in different stages of their lived and living experience, or people that have also brought their learned experience to take from something I listened to in a session earlier today. And we've got a lot of butcher's paper to get on flights, so hopefully extra baggage has been ordered. So for any of those that are taking butcher's paper, what I also note is that is your collective knowledge and wisdom and heart and soul on those papers. And so those of us, including me in my carry-on luggage, who are taking them back will hold them dear and make sure that they are shared with you and with others to continue that knowledge on. So thank you to those who've been so open. And to the people that were on the table yesterday in the family and friends session that come up with Care Tasker. I've already patented that overnight, and I think I'm just going to register it and take it as my own, so thanks very much. I also just wanted to acknowledge the openness of people who are in public office or public servants who've been here in the last couple of days, that it's not always easy to come and turn up and deeply listen to what people have to say, and that leaves me with a bit of hope and optimism that, you know, things start to shift and change. Actually, the more you have people with lived experience, not just advising, but also working in those roles and those systems, and you can already feel a kind of a fundamental shift, which I think is important. A couple of challenges I still sit with. I like to kind of question with curiosity and think about things, and so I'm still feeling curious about how we hold space for unique perspectives, and we don't fall into this kind of sameness that people with lived experience are one box, or all people who've attempted suicide are in one type of experience. So how do we hold space for all of that complexity and that diversity, but also how do we synthesize it in ways that others need to get the point? So I was listening in sessions I was in this morning about how do you not lose the whole story by creating the sound bites, and I think that's an ongoing challenge. And how do you take a collective and unified voice forward without and not miss the uniqueness and the specialness of each one of those? So I sit with that as a continued question with curiosity for myself. I loved hearing some wisdom, and I think things that just resonate with me around co-design and co-implementation, but actually co-design of what the problem is in the first place. So that came up in a session I was in again this morning. So, you know, finding solutions to problems you're given is one thing, but actually getting to define what the problem is in the first place would be a better place to start. So I heard that loud and clear and took that for myself, even though it wasn't a workshop I was facilitating. And thinking really deeply about who gets in the room, who doesn't even know the room exists yet, and how do we create those different opportunities to make sure that those different voices are heard, but also that they know that they're welcome even if they don't know the room exists. And the other thing, because I reconnected with John, that I haven't seen for probably more than a decade, that one point I got from John was just remembering that there's a lot of stuff that's already been done before, and so how do we bring the conversation without feeling like some people are either in Groundhog Day or we've thrown out things that have worked in the past and we've come back around to them as ideas. So how do we kind of keep the energy of keeping what works and creating space for new and innovative ways of doing things? So I think there's a freshness that comes from new voices, and I think that there's a history that comes from people who've been around for a while as well, and how do we bring those together? And my very, I guess, last thing I want to leave people with is I kind of made it as a joke to start with that I was really tired, but I think many of us are tired because people bring so much of themselves to days like this, and I just want to say to people, you know, take care coming out of the next couple of days as well, because it's not just our heads that are full, but it's our hearts, and people have kind of talked heart to heart for a couple of days now, and that's a difficult thing to do. So if you happen to run into me around Hobart in the next couple of days and I look very dazed and spacey, that's because I probably have no words left. So just flap your arms around and make it look like I should know who you are. My hashtag for the weekend is in Tassie doing nothing. So everyone, please go gently back to where you come from, and thank you for what you've given me in the last 2 days and the people I travelled here with. And I hope you got a little something that you can take back to others who weren't in this room. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jay Lee, and thank you to all 4 of our reflection speakers there for those fantastic reflections on the last couple of days. Just a final word of thanks to our sponsors, and just to pick up on Jay Lee's final point there, we are all going to need to be conscious of our own self-care over these next couple of days. So please do take good care of yourselves, wrap yourself in kindness, give yourself some space to simply be without needing to do anything in particular. Surround yourself with your most favourite things. Do something nice for yourself, given that we've all had a massive 2 days. And thank you to all of you for being such integral parts of the last 2 days. So please give yourselves a round of applause. Now, for anyone that is wishing to volunteer for Roses in the Ocean's Peer Care Companion in the community, or Peer Care Companion warm line services, we have a link on our website where you can register your details. So I would encourage you to go and have a look at that opportunity if you're interested in doing that. The number for the warm line callback service will be displayed on screen at the end of the plenary, along with a number of other support numbers for any of us to get in contact with should we need that over the coming days or weeks. Now, last but by no means least, it's my pleasure to introduce Justin Gange from Mates in Construction, who is going to see us out with one of his own creative inventions. So thank you, Justin.
There you go. Thanks, Stephen. Look, I guess, sorry for my backside there, but yeah. Just wave your hands, Hey, I just, for my view of this conference, one word that springs to mind is gratitude. Gratitude to Bronnie, Nicola, Stephen and the Roses team, not only for this incredible conference and providing a space for us people with lived experience to be able to learn and pass on our learnings to other people as well. I'm grateful to each and every one of you, but for the stuff that you do day in, day out, the stuff that you do in your courses with the people that are around you, giving opportunities so that our voices are not only heard, but are understood and actually informing policy and change in this nation. And I thank you for that. I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the amazing speakers, the incredible human beings with such wisdom, such courage, such knowledge to be able to share with us. I've been challenged, I've been motivated, and I'm a 50-year-old dodgy plumber from Logan. So if you can challenge and motivate a dodgy plumber from Logan, you're doing a great job. So I thank you, and I'm grateful for each and every speaker that took the courage to stand up and share their heart, share their passion. But most importantly, team, I'm actually grateful to each and every one of you in the room. For it is you that daily turn up. It is you that daily makes a difference in someone's life because of your experience. I have a mental illness. I have a living experience of over 40 years of suicidality. And sometimes it's tough to get up. But the fact is we've got a room full of people that are getting up to do what they can with the tools that they have to make a difference in someone else's life. Now, as I said, I have a mental illness, and one of the things that, you know, I enjoy having a sing-song as well, but one of the things that has brought a little bit of peace to my well-being in the last few years is writing poetry. And I wrote this poem a couple of years ago to honour the room, to honour people, the storytellers in the room. Since this conference, I'm starting to rethink my view on what a storyteller is and whether that's the limit of our influence as someone with a living experience. But I'm going to give it to you anyway, because that's what I prepared, you know. But I want a bit of grace in the room. I've never done this without a script, so I'm just going to go off the seat. If I get stuck somewhere, just go, woo, you're awesome. But anyway, no, it's all right. We'll be right. But please hear the heart. The intent of this poem is to celebrate each and every person in the room. You're flipping phenomenal. You're flipping amazing. And it's called The Storytellers, and it goes like this. Here's a shout out to some legends that's long been overdue. A shout out to you storytellers who use your gift to help a few. I want to take this moment to thank you for your heart, for what you do is priceless. You set yourself apart. You often tread the depths of the tough stuff in your life. You tell of hurt and heartache, of trauma and of strife. But then you speak of your redemption, the things that turned you around. You shine a light into that darkness with a hope that you have found. You take us on a journey, off with smiles and tears, but you're not the entertainment of the sound below the beers. You carry on traditions from every corner of the globe, passing on your lessons to each awaiting lobe. You motivate and encourage, you plant desire within our hearts, reminding us of our humanity and how we each must play our part. But there is no notoriety, no competition here, for every story's different. Every one of us is sincere. But when the dust has settled and the sword's back in its sheath, when the story's over, make sure that you debrief. For I know how tough self-care can be after selflessly exposing pain. With scar tissue raw and tender, it can leave you emotionally drained. Self-care, my friend, is number one to ensure a healthy stay. So be kind to you and make some plans to get you through the day. Now, to those who use the services of us people with LE, please consider us with compassion, for we are not a commodity. We are not a short distraction or a 20-minute slot. We are living, breathing humans who survived a major clot. We are people who, despite our past, will share our lessons learned with the hope that one may hear, one life that may be turned. We aren't a tick within a box or an event held once a year. We offer value immeasurable to everyone who hears. Every one of us has a journey, a rocky road we traverse through. So be kind to all the storytellers. For those tellers are me and you. Thanks, team. Look after yourself. No. That's for you. That is for you, every one of you. That standing ovation is for each and every person here that steps up daily to make a difference in the lives of those that are doing it tough, the lives of those that are hurting. That was for you. That was for you. But I want you to leave this place remembering, what can you do to look after yourself? How can you be kind to you? That's the best thing you can do for your family, your community, your workmates, is look after you first. So plan what you're going to do tonight. Might be a visit to the bar, I think we're going. Anyway, plan what you're going to do over the weekend. I live in Queensland, so it's going to be indoors because it's raining. Plan what you're going to do next week. But bottom line is, team, all of you have got humongous hearts. Look after those hearts. That's how we get through this stuff, and we're stronger together when they do that, team. So thank you again, Roses. Thank you to every one of you for what you do day in, day out. Much love and respect. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the Lived Experience Summit 2025. Tom, I've got a pair of glasses here. I need the mic. Nick. Yeah.